Good morning, and thank you for coming. Before we do our budget presentation, I'm going to ask Samuel from the Hartford Behavioral Health Group to say a few words. Samuel?
Hello, good day.
Come on over here.
Okay.
This is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Samuel Okioji. I work with Hartford Behavioral Health. I'm here with my CEO, Josie Robles, my colleagues, Christine Lawson and Ms. LeBron. We just want to come here to present our point of view as an agency. We are living in uncertain and troubled times. At Hartford Behavioral Health, we see the impact of mental health issues on children, young people, adults, and families on a daily basis. Now more than ever, there's a growing awareness of the important role that Hartford Behavioral Health and other providers play in the lives of our communities. Today, we stand together to affirm the need for resources to support and treat individuals suffering with behavioral health issues, often in silence, in isolation, in fear of being stigmatized simply by seeking help. Just days ago, a new report from Connecticut Department of Health revealed that mental disorders surpass respiratory problems and all other elements as the leading cause of hospitalization for children ages 5-14, teenagers and young adults in Connecticut. This report shows that the number of days that patients with behavioral health problems surged 5.3% between 2011 and 2013 to nearly 260,000 patients' days. Other categories, including cardiac cancer, declined during that time. The good news is there's a heightened awareness of mental health issues, especially among young people, which is likely a result of the work we are accomplishing through the services we provide in the community. The bad news, the shortage of residential and outpatient services is further threatened by looming funding cuts to social services, including behavioral health and substance abuse issues. A large proportion of Hartford Behavioral Health clients are low-income Hispanics and African Americans. Connecticut Office of Multicultural Affairs reported that ethnic and racial minorities have less access to behavioral health services, are less likely to be referred for services, delayed seeking services, are likely to receive services. Barriers include too few bilingual providers and preferences for culturally and racially similar providers. Consequently, Hispanics and African Americans have higher inpatient utilization for behavioral health issues than their white counterparts. African Americans have 3 times more utilization, and Hispanics have twice the rates. When individuals connect with Hartford Behavioral Health as signs of illness first emerge, crisis and costly hospitalization can be prevented, saving thousands of state dollars while saving lives. As we look forward further to the future in which people of color will represent half of the population, now it is time to be forward-thinking about addressing behavioral and other health disparities and ensuring that our system of care is something that we can count on. Thank you.
I want to thank Samuel for coming here, because what is important is, I think, the legislators who are here, not only supporting this budget, but those in this Capitol, have heard from their constituents that cutting social service needs is something, as a core function of government, that we must do. And when a budget seeks to balance itself by cutting those services as opposed to looking in other directions, that's when there's a problem. And what our budget tries to do is rebalance that position. We call this the roadmap to prosperity. We begin by saying we're putting forth a budget proposal that we're not saying this is it and there's nothing else. We want to start a dialogue. We want to start a conversation. We're putting forth a new idea, one that's just not rooted in a 2-year budget, but in a 6, 8, 12-year budget. One that's not looking just to plug up a hole for today, but give hope for the future. Because what we do today affects those yet unborn. Therefore, we have a bigger obligation than just plug a hole. We have an obligation of protecting core functions. We have an obligation of a different outlook for the future for the state of Connecticut. So our budget looks at the social services, and we restore the Husky aid to approximately 12,100 people. Those are folks who were, by the governor's proposal, were dropped and said, go get the Affordable Care Act, it's available. But those people on the lower end of the Husky scale can't afford that plan. We put them back. We put the burial benefits back for those who can't afford it. In the second year, we put 2% increase in the COLA for the private providers. We all know, we've all seen the program review investigative report that said private providers do a great job at their care. But if we don't give them the money, we're going to starve them out of existence. We need to fund them, at least to the cost of living. We have added $15 million to DDS, so 185 people can come off the DDS waiting list and we can move them. Something that we need to make a commitment of in the state of Connecticut. We have made DCF reforms with our budget as well. These are the core functions of government. These are things we have to make a priority. These and many more, but these are the highlights of the spinal cord of our budget. With that, I'd like to have Representative Claridis come up.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I know these are exciting days in this building, and whether we agree with our proposal, the governor's proposal, with the Democrats' proposal that will come out next week, they're exciting days because they give us hope. They give us hope for what this state can be, what this state will be, and what we want it to be. The state that we have, a lot of us lived in our whole lives. Some of us just moved here, but most of us who want to stay here, who want to raise families here, who want to earn a good living here. And that's why these days has so much hope in them. And when we put this budget together, we did it with those things in mind. We did it because we sit here year after year and we take Band-Aids and we put it on problems. And we all know that those Band-Aids fall off, usually sooner than later. And next year or the year after, we have the same problem, but usually worse. So as Senator Fasano mentioned, our caucuses decided that we want to be able to fix as many problems as we can, but we want to fix them in the long term, if possible, not just for the next year or two. We hear about municipalities and municipality funding and how no money was taken away. But it's easy to say that no money was taken away when you see one line, and then you look below those lines and you see resident trooper funding cuts, and you see library cuts, and you see regional fire training school cuts, cuts for state parks in Connecticut that a lot of us enjoy. What we did in our budget was restored all those cuts because we believe those are the things that make our towns and cities tick. We sit here in this building and we know about what's going on in the state capitol. We know about what's going on in the Hartford region. But in our towns and cities, that's where things happen. That's what people care about. They care about being able to go to their library and get a book. They care about taking their children there and teaching them that kind of thing. We care about particularly our volunteer fire departments that most of us have, and allowing them training schools to continue to do the great work that they do. We restore 80% of probate courts. Now, that's not 100%. I know that's the next question, but you know what? Unfortunately, we have a limited amount of money this year. I know that is not a shock to anybody in this room, but we have to prioritize, and we've been using that word a lot lately. And that means that there are certain things that will be taken first. But as Senator said, we in our caucuses believe that the people in our society that are most needy, that most need our help, that are the most vulnerable, they are the ones that need to be beneficiaries of these budgets. And in that vein, we give a lot of tax relief. But remember, this isn't about I'm cutting your taxes this year or I'm not raising your taxes next year. This is about reform. And we use that word often. And usually we can put any word we want before the word reform, and people say, that's great. They don't know what it means, but they like it because it's a positive word. But we put meaning behind that word when we talk about it. We're restoring the sales tax exemption for clothing and shoes under $50. We are eliminating the caps on business tax credits so businesses can continue to invest in this state. We're eliminating the corporate tax surcharge, as you've heard year after year, and the business entity tax. And why those things are important is because when we talk about people going back to work and being able to have a job and raise their families and pay for their home and put food on their table, they can't do that unless they have a job. And they can't have a job unless businesses can thrive in this state. We are making sure that loss carry forwards can continue, and those are things that the governor has taken out. And importantly, in my mind, are phasing out income tax pension. We've talked for many years about pensions being taxed and how that's not fair. People work for years and years, and they sit there, and then they are supposed to enjoy their golden years, and what happens? They're now being taxed on that pension that they worked for. Well, in our budget, we are allowing that to be phased out because we think it's important for you, when you put all that hard work and you put all that time and effort into raising your family and working hard, that you be able to enjoy the fruits of that. What's important is that these reforms that Senator Fasano and I are talking about today are affecting the middle class of the state of Connecticut. The people that get left out a lot of times. The people that drive this state. The people that most of us are, the people that most of us know. And those are people that need relief and will end up staying in this state.
So a couple of things. Couple of big components. Let's talk about them. The hospital tax. It's a big issue. We have taken the hospital tax and we've making it more fair. We've making it more equitable. Still giving the federal money that we have, that the governor wanted in his budget. We achieved that. But we make it so that the smaller hospitals can compete. We make it so that it is a progressive system. We also put back the Medicaid cuts that the governor took out. You had a 5.6 reduction in 2016 and 17. We make it 2.8 in 16, so that gives money to the hospitals. And in 17, we completely eliminate the cuts. Number two, so that makes our system a lot more equitable for all the hospitals. Number two, there's a tax credit that only hospitals can use. It's an urban tax credit. When you do a project in the cities, you get a tax credit. That's the only credit hospitals can use against the state hospital tax. The governor cut that. We reinstated that. I don't know how much it is per hospital, but it's $50 million a year. You don't know how it breaks down per hospital because that's ownership right interest, so you don't know. But basically, it's $50 million a year. So our hospital tax is a fair tax. It allows the smaller hospitals to compete. And at the end of the day, it is a lot better than the one that's currently out there. The other way we get to this, to do the relief that Representative Claridis talked about, was looking at labor savings. Many of you were here when we talked, when the governor came up and gave us the largest tax increase in Connecticut's history. And at that point in time, the tax increase was sold that if you put up $1.6 billion, you taxpayers, and we make cuts of equivalent amount, our friends on the other side of the, or I should say on the other side of the aisle, but our friends in the unions would also come and everyone would share. Well, when all got filtered out, there was $253 million according to OFA, which fell short. And in the CBAC agreement, there actually was a group that was supposed to get together to find these savings prospectively. I have asked and FOI'd that information, and it's been 3 weeks, and I have yet to receive that information, but it's easy to find. There was only one meeting. And at that one meeting, there was an election or 2 people to be appointed or elected, I'm not sure, to run and chair that committee. And it never met again. So there was $253 million short. So all we're saying to the governor is, listen, you made a pledge. It was $253 million short. We're not asking for more. We're just saying, go get what was promised. Go get what was promised to the state of Connecticut. Go get what was promised to those people on DDS and DSS and Medicaid. Go bring that money in, and no more, no less. We're also looking at a reduction of overtime. Overtime in the state of Connecticut in the fiscal year is $238 million. And if you look at that and how it breaks out, we all know the rules. Most of us who are standing up here know that overtime is included in people's pension. We need to change that idea. We need to change that idea. Overtime is a management tool, therefore it can manage the people which they govern. So do what every other business does out there. Do what is expected of you, which is, there's times that you need it. Somebody is sick, somebody is ill, some issue arises and you're short staff, you have to fill by overtime. But you can use other tools. Stay late on a file with respect to DCF, the next morning show up a couple hours later. You can shift it around, but we have to start with the contracts. And they'll be up in 2016, 2017. And that's why in our second year of the budget, we say only $100 million of overtime is what we allocate. In the first year, we say 150 because you have to sort of implement the rules, which will give you more flexibility. And our budget does something that we're very proud of. It talks about long-term initiatives. It talks about having a cap on allocations for the future. It talks about not exceeding a number. The governor talked about going up to, I think, 2.4 or 2.5 billion on the general obligation bonds. We need to reduce that because that is a debt that, as I said, somebody yet unborn will be paying for 20 years plus after they are born. We need to slow that up. The labor savings that we're talking about and changes roll out to the future, including overtime. We need to address the problems that we have, as he said, with the new pension idea. We need to talk about, for new state employees in the union, new, not existing, new. We should do what they do in Rhode Island, which is a hybrid defined benefit contribution plan. So what we did in our budget for the second year is we actually put money away to begin that process. So we could start about not a defined benefit plan, but a contribution plan. So we're starting the conversation. It will be up to the governor in 2016-17 to negotiate that, and I'm sure he can. But this is a new way to look. We cannot do what we've done in the past. They're changing municipalities, those rules, and other states. All we're asking is, let's get in the mix. Part of our budget that we talked about earlier, I just want to refresh the recollections of folks, is the transportation budget. Our budget that we put forth from both caucuses was that we can do a transportation project and have $67 billion in 30 years without raising taxes of any sort and without tolls. There hasn't been any substantive reason why we can't go forward on that. There's been a lot of rhetoric, but there's never been a substantive reason. As we stand here today, there is not a transportation initiative to move the state forward, which is funded, real, and can start to work. We can start the 1st of July by passing that along with this budget and get Connecticut moving. I'll turn it back over to Representative Claridis.
as we mentioned before, we're not standing here in front of you and saying this is the end-all be-all. There's nothing better than this. Every single part of it is perfect. But what we are saying is very clear. We have been having back and forth conversation for many months about a budget, about proposals, about suggestions, about conversations, about meetings. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing it at a certain point. But the reality is that we are all legislators in this building, and we are all here and charged with one job. It is to make sure that the state of Connecticut is taken care of in the way that it believes it should be. Public safety, health of people, allowing them to have a good quality of life, all the while doing it in a fiscally responsible way. Now, I certainly understand after being here for many years that we all may define fiscally responsible in a different way. But what I do know is this. 4 years ago, we stood here and we heard talk of, and the final result of the highest tax increase in the state's history, of shared sacrifice, of having people give back. And we may not have agreed with that, but that was the law of the land. Part of our budget now, as we've mentioned, is having those things given back, having everybody share in what we're doing. And when anybody told us, you guys can't do this without a tax increase, you can't do it, I have to be honest with you, I didn't know 4 or 5 months ago if we could. That's why you go down the road. That's why you do this. That's why you don't leave any stone unturned. That's why we're here day and night doing this. But at the very least, we've proven a few things. 1, you can do it without tax increases. 2, you can do it while making structural changes to what we do in this building. Structural changes to social services, the people that need it the most. Structural changes to what towns and cities need, the places we go home to every day and night. Structural changes to tax reform. Those are things we need to look at. Once again, cannot continue to put the Band-Aid on the problem and hope when we go to bed at night that next year will be any different. Because I think we've proven that next year is not different unless we make it different this year. So thank you so much, and I think we're ready to take questions now.
Before we take questions, I just want to recognize Representative Chabran, Senator Kane, who worked very hard on this. Representative, Dad, you guys get applause? Representative Davis and Senator France, which is over there. And we got to take a little bow here, right? So for our staff, yes, the hard work, the long hours, putting everything together, the copies, I want to take this opportunity to thank them from the House and the Senate. You guys have done a great job. Thank you so much.